like, listen, this is the pre-lunch session. That means we're going to have to be electric in this instance.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, so
let's do this.
Let's do this. Real quick, I do have to give a plug, and it's the shameless of plugs, like, forgive me, 30 seconds. We're a measurement disruptor. That's what Attain is, tying ad exposure to sales impact in real time. Think of it as like double verify for sales outcomes. Ethan, we should probably chat. There's probably a way you can link that together. But today, we're not talking about advertising. We're not talking about measurement. We're talking about consumer experience and the strategy there within. Jillian and I had a wonderful chat in prep for this. Jillian, I think before we even dive into any of the above, you've had an awesome career trajectory in all sorts of like agency background and then different organizations throughout. Would you mind, just as a stage setter, to give the folks in the audience an understanding of your professional background and what led you to today?
Yeah, happy to. So I have done various roles within the context of digital e-commerce for the duration of my career, which has been really exciting. And so I actually began in digital marketing at Walmart. And so I worked at an agency called the Martin Agency, which is one of the biggest agencies in the country. I went to school in Richmond, Virginia, which is where they're headquartered. And so this is back when Walmart had completely outsourced to the Martin Agency every aspect of their marketing functions, right, before they brought things in-house. And so I was able to join on to that company, which was incredible. I worked on a number of Super Bowl campaigns and initiatives, and we began to set up kind of their consumer segmentation strategy in the context of digital marketing. And so after a few years taking that on, it was apparent that apps were the new and burgeoning e-commerce channel, right? And so I went back to school to learn how to build and design apps, which was really exciting. And so I then spent a number of years within the product and product design aspect of digital, which was very fun. And so worked at Total Wine, which is the biggest alcoholic retailer in the country. And I stood up their product design organization, which was really cool. I was able to partner with Instacart, and we launched our consumer-facing app, Same Day Booze to Your Door, first to market proposition, which, as you can imagine, went over really fucking well with consumers. And so that was a really incredible ride. At the time, Amazon, Walmart, Target were all going after fresh frozen grocery and order pickup, and in Target's case, drive up, right, of said perishable goods. And so I left Total Wine, given my experience in adult beverage, right, because think about the consumer experience, dependent on literally down to the zip code in which you live, your catalog offering, right, could be very different. So I live now in New Jersey, which unfortunately some of those dry zip codes will creep up on you, right, for reasons unknown, and still doing my research there. But anyway, Vlad could have all of the things, and Jill could have 4 options, right? And so that can lead to a very disappointing consumer experience for obvious reasons. And so that experience allowed me to go to Target. I was with Target for 8 years. I oversaw the Drive Up launch and rollout nationwide. And so all things design facing and even marketing and merchandising strategy led that initiative, which was very exciting. Then I moved to digital merchandising, which is where I was for the last 8 years at Target. So again, kind of completing all the spokes in the digital wheel. And so I oversaw their beauty business for several years, led the Ulta partnership, store-in-store at Target, prestige brands in a mass environment. I then led their women's fashion business for several years in strategic partnerships. I'm rocking all Target today, in case you were wondering. I still have 80% of my wardrobe is Target. And so then I left Target last spring to join Samsung, and so now I'm over the consumer experience organization, which is huge.
It is. It's a super interesting trajectory, especially because you've never been in consumer electronics before. You've been in this role for a year now. What drove you to be in consumer electronics, and what have you learned over the past year that you couldn't have anticipated until you got there?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of change, and I'm also a big proponent of taking educated risk and taking on a new adventure in which I feel 70% comfortable with, right? And so my point is, I have moved and jumped to new opportunity when they have presented themselves. So moved to Minnesota during a blizzard to join Target. Now up in New Jersey, I'm from the Washington, D.C. area. So generally speaking, I was excited, given I have a lot of retailer experience, to go on the brand side. Right, and I also was excited at the aspect of a global premium brand at that, right? I figured if I can crack this nut, the brand side of things, I could continue, hopefully, my venture with it. And so that's why I went to Samsung. I think I've always been such an incredible fan of theirs, and I think that the way that they position themselves and the way that they've grown over decades in which they've been around has just been hugely exciting.
So consumer experience and the strategy for consumer experience doesn't seem to be a universal concept across businesses. What's that mean within the walls of Samsung? What's your remit entail?
Yeah, great question. So CX and the CX industry is only a few years old, right? And so you're exactly right. A lot of companies consider CX more of the customer service side of things, right? So that's calling and complaining about whatever product or issue that you've had. At Samsung, we are a smaller D2C channel, right? So we're about 8 years in our D2C journey. And so for us right now, it's essentially all of the digital touch points that a consumer can have with our brand as a part of my remit. And so merchandising and user experience design are the two biggest functions in which I oversee, which, right, kind of work together to ensure that you're feeling that the experience you're having online is mirroring the premiumness of the products in which we build and offer. Love that.
Okay, so since COVID, there's been significant change in consumer buying habits and the patterns in which they go about purchasing. And generally, with any brand, especially if there's brand marketers in the room, what they have to deal with is, one, a whole bunch of choice, right? Even think about from a marketing perspective, the average consumer, and this is true, I did look it up, the average consumer is exposed to 10,000 different forms of marketing, whether it's advertising or a logo on a cup or what have you, every single day. And if you're not careful with how your brand is commanding attention or being really deliberate and intentional with how you're communicating with your customer base or those that are not yet your customers but might be in the discovery phase, it's going to be really hard to see you. So sort of a two-part question. Given the current state of shifting preferences as well as just tons of options that are out there, what is your philosophy? What is your understanding? What is your perspective of what's happening with consumer preferences and how they shop? And then also, what is your position and what's the overarching strategy within your role that you're applying at Samsung in order to be able to control for that?
Yeah, so going back to your question a moment ago about what did I maybe not foresee as a part of joining a global brand, right, is that you're not in control, and I think many of us feel this way, of your brand given the context in which it is coming in contact with the consumer, right? So Samsung, we offer our products through a number of retailers, right, in addition to our D2C channel. And so as a result, unifying, right, how does your brand show up within the context of various platforms, other brands, retailers, is a huge challenge. There's no doubt about it. And I would say that's the biggest learning. Not that I didn't foresee it, right, but it's just more challenging than one could ever kind of equip themselves with. And so as a result, right, we're really prioritizing this year investing in the right technology, right? Investing in the right marketing tactics and strategies, also technologically focused to ensure that we are better unifying the way that our brand shows up externally within the market, right? So we pride ourselves in premium quality products. And so that has to penetrate, right, that value proposition, regardless of if you're on HomeDepot.com, Samsung.com, TikTok, right?
It's really interesting. And quick anecdote. I come from a background, my dad owns an electronic repair shop in Louisville, Kentucky, where I was raised, and we are authorized Samsung dealers and a repair team. And I've kind of grown up since a childhood of actually being a fan of Samsung. I have that, I'm probably that top 5% customer that you guys are looking to move your entire customer base into. We have Samsung frames in every single room. I buy the custom frames to snap onto it so it matches with the aesthetic of our house. We love Samsung TVs. I know there's there's a wider product array, and maybe we'll get to that in a second. But for us, we have such a mind association with Samsung as a premium brand, as a brand that has like elegance and evokes something that is above just a TV. That, at least I have that kind of like, as weird as it is to say, like romantic notion about Samsung, given my upbringing of it, how it presents itself as a brand. How are you able to drive that type of loyalty or that type of preference that goes beyond the background noise when, for example, if I walk into a Best Buy, there's a wall of TVs, there's Samsung, but then there's also LG, then there's also economy models like TCL. How do you drive that sort of differentiation? What's some of the strategies that you're deploying to make sure that that's something that you guys are able to control for?
Yeah, and the TV example is a great one, and I know we touched on this because TV technology has come a long way in the last few years, right? So Frame, very much our bread and butter hero product, as is our 98-inch terrace television for those of you who have a ungodly outdoor space in which you can enable something like that. So God bless you if you do. But I would say, again, challenging. We rely to a certain degree on the heritage of our brand, right? Because we are known as the premium offering in especially television and mobile devices, right? And so that said, we can't rely, and Katie mentioned this in our panel a few minutes ago, but we can't rest on our laurels there, right? And so what I would say is that we're trying to hone in on what are the real value propositions that allow us to break through in an environment where there's a shit ton of TVs, right? Or Apple is our biggest competitor within the mobile market. We are AI driven, right? And so all of our products are driven through AI. And so for us, that is our huge differentiator. And I would say, when you ask about what are consumers looking for and how have they changed, they are looking for quality product, right? And especially the younger demographics, all of the Gen Z, Y, everyone, they want smart products, right? And they want products that are going to drive value and ease within their life, right? And so Smart Things, for those who aren't familiar, right, is our bread and butter offering that allows for that connectivity. Right, so something we announced at CES, for those of you who were there or who caught wind, right, but our partnership with Instacart, right, we can enable your refrigerator, right, which is driven through AI, to say, what are the groceries that Vlad forgot to pick up this week because he was too busy, but his partner wants to make X recipe tonight. His phone can then break through and say, great, we'll order those few groceries through Instacart, right? And so that's a first to market differentiator for us. And so I would say Smart AI is a big piece of what we're looking to do within the context of other competitors, as well as some of the, we call them always on offerings, right? So our warranty for something like an appliance, no one else can touch, right? So there is a loyal consumer base who wants to buy through the manufacturer. There's a peace of mind that comes with purchasing through Samsung when you really want to ensure your product has the longevity, right? When you buy through Home Depot, you assume price is your value proposition. So that price isn't the value proposition, you're able to differentiate away from that. Otherwise, it's a race to the bottom because TVs are getting cheaper and cheaper. So to be able to maintain that elevated presence, one of the things that we talked about that I thought was super interesting was such an overwhelming focus on like, how are we going to expand the DTC channel? I believe the stat was it is 10% of sales in North America. What's your play to expand that and to continue driving consumers in that direction rather than through a retailer where it's harder to have that narrative play out? It's a great question. Marketing is a huge focus of ours, right? And strategic marketing and trying to enter into new and innovative marketing tactics is a huge focus of ours right now. And so I would say driving good quality, I call them high calorie consumers to your D2C platform is challenging. Again, when you're in the Google confines of I'm looking for a Samsung refrigerator, and Home Depot offers it, and also Amazon and Target and Walmart, and then Samsung kind of last on the list, right? And so we're trying to find ways to break through and to prioritize you finding us through our D2C platform. And again, that will go to things like incredible warranty offerings. We also offer trade-in for a lot of our products, which is unique to Samsung, right? You can trade in any Samsung product and put that value towards a new product. So if your family has 3 phones between you, you could put those all towards a new refrigerator, as an example. So we're trying to find unique ways to ensure that, again, it's not price, but it's other forms of value, because value can mean so many things.
So the idea is, in a perfect world, someone, the beachhead is either they have a Samsung device like a phone or a TV in their living room, and use that as the opportunity for you to like cross-sell them across the rest of your portfolio. Speak to that portfolio, just in case folks don't know how varied it is, and then a vision of how it all kind of comes together.
Yeah. So mobile devices, very much our bread and butter. TVs and audio, right? So sound bars.
Real quick on the mobile devices, you said there was an interesting stat, 20% of the GDP?
Well, yeah, so Samsung is 20% of the Korean GDP. At large, so not mobile specific, just at large. Yeah. Yes, and I was just in Seoul the week before last at our global headquarters. Samsung, it's called Digital City, and it's this campus doesn't even cover the strength and the magnitude. Hundreds of shuttle buses. There's over 50,000 employees just in that campus, mega campus. And so, yes, Samsung is a behemoth globally, but certainly within the Korean market.
But back to, sorry, I thought that was with the devices itself. So back to devices. Yep.
Yes, so we mobile devices and accessories, right? So we have a ring, tracks your wellness. We have a watch. We have earbuds, we have other accessories for mobile, then TV, yes, and audio, and then digital appliances, right? So fridge, laundry, dry cleaners, we have all of those unique offerings.
So, okay, the only thing constant is change, and consumer preferences are going to continue to change. Given you have your fingers firmly on the pulse of how this is changing right now, if you were to predict out over the next 18 to 24 months, or call it 2 to 3 years just in general, how is consumer preferences continue to change? Where do you think it goes if you were to put it in a time box and open it up again in 3 years and see how close you might have been to that prediction?
It's a great question, and I hope to only get portions of it correct, right? Because all of us are trying to prioritize and invest in what we, yes, understand could be consumer preference bases and what ROI can we, right, of course, obtain from that. I would say, and going back to our personalization panel a few minutes ago, there is an expectation that you feel uniquely tailored to as a consumer when you enter any channel at this point, right? In-store, digital, what have you. And so I would say that that's only going to increase and will no longer just be a baseline. It will be a high-end expectation, right? And so that is where a lot of us are investing our energy and our technological aspects there.
When it comes to the other marketers in the room, what advice would you give, right, for them to stay in front of shifting perceptions? Just because you've achieved some type of brand equity doesn't mean you're going to keep it. To your point, and from the previous panel also, is how would you guide and provide recommendations to others in the room to ensure that they're not chasing, but they actually stay in front of it and keep their eyes and ears close to it?
And I would say, and Lauren spoke to this, you have to hear from your consumer, I think, and especially being in consumer experience and strategy, many companies are like, nope, we're consumer first. Nope, we're prioritizing what the consumer wants. Probably largely BS, and not for reasons because they don't mean it or they don't care, right? But the reality is it can slow things down to really intercept your consumer in the right way.
Sure.
And to synthesize those insights and to apply them in an enterprise or a cross-functional matrix, right? So all of these functions in big companies are trying to pull insights but seldom are they really sharing and cross-sharing together to say, what are we going to unify and rally around that benefits all of us, right? So I would say first thing is to really ensure you're prioritizing what is your consumer saying, what is their feedback, what are they looking for from you, especially in the context of what are the value propositions that you as a brand can provide them, right? I think it's less about, well, how's my website faring against others and checkout time, right? Like what's the page speed, right? Like it's about what can we do differently to attract you and to acquire you and to retain you. And then I would say the second thing is around just testing and learning. So don't be afraid to stand shit up and see how it works, but then to quickly also shut it down or to pivot, right? And I think a lot of people, and I get it, like we're all strapped for budget, right? Or we have to get however many stakeholders to agree to something internally, or in my case, globally, right? But you have to move quickly and nimbly and really assess what works for your company, because there are a ton of incredible offerings out there. As we know, walking some of the booths, right, and the floor here, even at Shop Talk, there's endless opportunity and offering, but not all brands and retailers are created equal, right? So what might work for you or for Katie might not work for me for good reason. And so we have to be always researching and testing and learning.
Lovely. Okay, we'll open it up to questions in just a moment. Let's recap here, because I think this is really important. Samsung, storied brand, recognized brand, a lot of brand equity right now, also recognizes the importance in shifting consumer behavior. Areas of investment to ensure that you're providing an elevated level of consumer experience, growing the DTC channel so that you can control that storytelling and narrative. Adding a layer of AI future that ensures that you have interconnectivity across your portfolio of products, and you're able to provide a service that perhaps other consumer electronics providers don't already like. That you seem way more mature in that space than your competitive set. What else, if we were to summarize a couple other elements from this conversation to take away?
Yeah, I would say storytelling, right? And because selfishly, I'm very passionate about how merchandising and marketing function together, right? To provide both in the confine of your brand or retail experience, but then externally within your marketing channels, like what are those stories that you're telling? How are you situating your brand or your product even to, again, drive those value propositions, or to ladder back to something that's seasonally or culturally relevant? And so something that I love about Samsung, because I bring that deep merchandising, marketing, storytelling angle, is just how much storytelling there is to do at this brand. And so that continues to fuel my fire very much. And a lot of our partnerships have enabled that. So for those of y'all who were either at the Olympics or watched the opening ceremony, right, all of the boats down the Seine were filmed with the Galaxy AI phone, right? And so, and then all the screens across the city of Paris were Samsung, right? So we're really trying to differentiate and to reach the consumer in new ways, right? And so I would say the storytelling angle is what really allows me to feel really good about my current role and future.
I love that. Randy, do we have time for questions, or do we got to wrap?
We do. We have 7 minutes.
7 minutes, sweet.
Not to be exact.
That's great. So guys, anyone that's been listening along, any questions from the audience that Jillian could concept on?
Or have we scared everyone?
I got a little late, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I have a question as far
Sure.
as the new social shopping channels and how you're addressing that kind of at all.
Great question. And I would say candidly, I don't think anyone has it figured out, right? There's a limited ROI, and I think the measurement angle, right, of how do social channels drive your D2C sales and revenue continues to be, I think, a nut for all of us to crack, right? Because at the baseline, it is about what is the ROI that these social channels are providing to your P&L, right? And so I'm excited to learn, especially here and beyond, what are the new offerings that could allow for that measurement angle, right? Because you're talking with your CMO and your CFO, and they're both like, well great, what, right? And you have to bridge that gap, and you have to connect their problem to solve to their problem to solve, right? And ultimately, again, it's about the consumer. So I would say we are thinking about it in unique ways through obviously affiliate strategies. TikTok is obviously in a weird state and unprecedented, right? There are new offerings from Meta, what have you, and so Google's changing rapidly, right? We're trying to stay agile and really up to speed on how are people allowing us to insert our brand, but I would say measurement is the big angle that I hope to. Anyway, if you can solve it, Vlad, that'd be great. What do you think? Okay, we'll chat. Yes. Okay, great.
Anybody else?
I have a question. So, Samsung is, by definition, omnichannel in many ways, right? You touch consumers across a multitude of opportunities. Trying to maintain an experience across that is key. So how do you do that knowing that the consumer is in control and the store has become pervasive? Right? It's everywhere at any given time, in any given situation. How do you maintain that experience? Because at the end of the day, it's experience that will convince somebody to buy a product or a brand. Price maybe, but ultimately the experience. How do you do that in where everything seems to be commerce oriented?
Yeah, great question. And for context, Samsung, we only have a handful of stores in the country, a handful, right? And they are experiential stores. So, and we had a store for a long time in the meatpacking district. We unfortunately closed that at the end of the year to move to another New York location. But that was another thing that brought me to this brand, into this role, right? Because I've largely at Target and Total Wine, both are very, they are top rated from an in-store perspective. People just salivate when they think about, oh my God, in-store at Target, Total Wine is an adult candy shop, whatever, right? So I was excited actually to move to a company that had an opposite problem to solve, somewhat to your question, right? So driving omni-channel in our experiential stores were, as you can imagine, and as you've probably experienced, we have a lot of incredible connectivity in that controlled environment. Now, if your question is also the retail side of things, yes, because we are in Home Depot and we are in Best Buy and Target, that is obviously more challenging, but the close relationships and the unified expectation level setting of, okay, Best Buy, how are you going to set my brand apart, right? And the really transparent agreement that you have is absolutely critical. Especially Best Buy, I'll give them a shout out. They've come light years further in their in-store visual merchandising, store signage, all of the things. They've really invested in their in-store presence, right? Which obviously helps Samsung and everyone else. But no, it's challenging, and it relies on a very, very sound relationship. So similar to other strategic partnerships I've worked on, Ulta at Target, if you don't have a very steadfast agreement of how does my brand come through in the environment of your brand, there will be a world of hurt for you ongoing. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
We probably have time for one more before we break for lunch.
Getting back to the analytics part, solid is that something you can speak to?
It is. It also isn't, because I have a really fabulous peer who's over our data and analytics function, thank God for me. But all of us rely entirely, right, on that foundation. And so we've invested the last 2 years to ensuring that we have a sound foundation, right? And that our insights, as I mentioned earlier, are not siloed within the kind of organization cross-functionally, right? And that we're sharing and that we're learning and evolving together. So I would say there's some exciting advancements that we're making this year in ensuring the maturity of our data, the accuracy, the quality is meeting the needs that we have, because we are a company who prides ourselves on go-to-market speed, right? And so also something that I love for Samsung, and that maybe other bigger retailers struggle with. Go-to-market speed at Target looked very differently from Samsung, right? Who's big on innovation and getting things out there and really being flashy, right? Catching people. And so I hope that answers your question. If there's something specific about data that you want to know, I'm happy to delve in.
I mean, just in terms of there's some part of this world that is still wild, right?
Yeah. And I think you have to have trust and confidence, right? Because at the end of the day, data is largely directional, right? And so you have to make, again, those educated risks. You have to have alignment with your stakeholders. You need leadership buy-in, right? So then that's where leaders like myself, like that is our challenge to solve, is to mobilize the learnings that we have into the greater good and to, again, move quickly.
Love that. And this was absolutely wonderful. I mean, you can tell that you are in this like really interesting, it's sort of like in the confluence of science a little bit, but a lot of artistry you get to deploy, especially with the embarrassment of riches that Samsung has, as the brand equity that Samsung has. You're awesome. This was an awesome session. Thank you so much for sharing
Thank
all
you,
of your
Vlad.
wisdom.
Thank you.
Guys, round of applause for Jillian.